front of you. You should be turned to page 36. The title of today's short story is 7th Grade by Gary Soto. Again, going over the objectives that we're going to cover in class today. There's several of them, but the main two that I want you to keep in mind. Number one, you're going to be reading for comprehension. Okay? And number two, you're going to be drawing inferences. An inference, again, from prior knowledge that you've already been tested on and that you should already know from previous literature classes. Drawing inferences is basically where you read some type of text and then you make your own judgment on what the author was attempting for the reader to understand about it. Are inferences always going to be right according to one person compared to another? No. All the time, there are different connotations and different definitions of what people read when they read text. Okay? It can be any kind of text. It can be a sales ad. You pick up a sales ad. Let's say you're going to, who knows what Black Friday is? Black Friday is always that Friday after Thanksgiving, right? When people, they started opening up on Thursday night, and I've been right a part of it. I've watched fights break out at Walmart over Nintendo because their baby girl wanted a pink one instead of a blue one. I'm talking about fist fights where baby net police had to come in and arrest them, tow them out, cuff and stuff. So, you can, anything that you read, you need to make sure that you make your own judgments about it, okay? And I know that today the way is the way of the computer and technology. But don't forget, books. Books, books, books. If you don't like to read, you're going to have to read anyway. So you might as well go ahead and start learning how to do it if you haven't already. Learning is a continuous thing. Reading is a continuous thing. I read all the time. I don't like reading graduate textbooks, but I have to read them. Sometimes I find them enjoyable. I like reading stuff on my own. Magazines, whatever. Okay? Reading's always going to be involved. Cross the curriculum. Alright, if you'll join me on page 36 as I read aloud. On the first day of school, Victor stood in line half an hour before he came to a wobbly card table. He was handed a packet of papers and a computer card on which he listed his one elective, French. He already spoke Spanish and English, but he thought someday he might travel to France, where it would be cool. Not like Fresno, where summer days reached 110 degrees in the shade. There were rivers in France, huge churches, and fair-skinned people everywhere, the way that there were all brown people all around Victor. Besides, Teresa, a girl he really liked since their catechism classes at St. Teresa's, was taking French too. With any luck, they would be in the same class. Teresa's going to be my girl this year, he promised himself, as he left the gym full of the students in their new fall clothes. All right, question number one. This will be on your Word document. Okay? Question number one. And as you can see, the question is listed in your on the left hand or the right hand side of your text where it says, what background information do you learn about Victor in the first paragraph? Tell me 3 things that you learned about Victor in the first paragraph that I just read to you. You don't have to write the question, just write the 3 answers. I'm not going to make you repeat something that's already written for you. I'm not one of these teachers that makes you copy questions just because I don't want to have to deal with it. No, sir, you don't. Again, name 3 things that you learned about Victor in the background information in the first paragraph. As we move through the text, we will go over these at the end to check your comprehension. Once you finish, to indicate that you are finished with the first question, you can pull your visor back down, or the hood of your computer back down, so it fits closed. things that we learned about Victor in the opening paragraph. There were probably some words that you might not understand. And a good rule of thumb is when you see something strange written in the text, like there was an indication, there's a footnote at the bottom of the page, right? And it had what number beside it? 1. And that's one of the background features that you learned about Victor. Let's talk about that for a second. I'll just discuss that one at the bottom. DJ, would you please read what it says at the bottom? That word is catechism.
General classes in religious instruction.
What most notably, what religion is that associated with more often than not? It's a form of Christianity. Catholic. Catholicism. I went through catechism classes. It's where you learn about the teachings of the church. Okay? It would be related to, like, how many of you have ever been to Sunday school before? That's Protestant catechism. Basically, it's all it is. So you're due. If you've been to Sunday school and you've listened to Bible stories, it's the same thing. Okay? Mr. Sellers, you want to read that?
She was cute. And good in math, too. Victor thought as he walked down the hall to his homeroom, he ran into his friend Michael Torres by the water fountain that never turned off. They shook hands Raza style. And like Coach Jones said, there's another footnote. You can look at them as we read. And they jerked their heads at one another in a saluto de vato. How come you're making a face? Asked Victor. I ain't making a face, Essay. This is my face. Michael said his face had changed during the summer. He had read in GQ magazine that his older brother had borrowed from the bookmobile, and he noticed that the male models all had the same look on their face. They would stand, one arm around a beautiful woman, and scowl. They would sit at a pool, their rippled stomachs dark with shadow, and scowl. They would sit at a dinner table, cool drinks in their hands, and scowl. I think it works, Michael said. He scowled and let his upper lip quiver. His teeth showed along with the ferocity of his soul. Belinda Reyes walked by a while ago and looked at me, he said. Victor didn't say anything, though he thought his friend looked pretty strange. They talked about recent movies, about baseball, their parents, and the horrors of picking grapes in order to buy their clothes. Picking grapes was like living in Siberia, except hot and more boring. What classes are you taking? Michael said, scowling. French, how about you? Spanish? I ain't so good at it, even if I am a Mexican. I'm not either, but I'm better at it than math, that's for sure. A teeny 3-beat bell propelled the students to their homerooms. The two friends socked each other in the arms and went their ways. Victor thinking, man, that's weird. Michael thinks making a face makes him look handsome. On his way to the bathroom, Victor tried to scowl, but he felt foolish. Until out of the corner of his eye, he saw a girl looking at him. He thought, ain't he done well? And he scowled with greater conviction. In homeroom, roll was taken, emergency cards were passed out, and they were given a bulletin to take home to their parents. The principal, Mr. Belton, spoke over the crackling loudspeaker, welcoming the students to a new year, new experiences, and new friendships. The students squirmed in their chairs and ignored him. They were anxious to go to first period. Victor sat calmly, thinking of Teresa, who was 2 rows away reading a paperback novel. This would be his lucky year. She was in his homeroom and would probably be in English and math classes. And, of course, French. All right. Look back at lines 25 through 27. You know how to find the line numbers? It's the numbers in the left-hand margin. So if you see 30, the line one below it's got to be 31. I want you to find lines 25 through 27 and lines 39 through 41.
29 through 20, 29 through 37, you said?
25 through 27 and 39 through 41. When those girls, and write this on your paper, it'll be number 2. When these girls see Michael scowling, and he says, I scowled, and they noticed me, what do you think those girls are really thinking? Number 2.
Again, once you finish, make sure you indicate such by fist closing your computer screen. You only asked for one, correct?
Yeah, just tell me what you think the girls are really thinking when they looked at them for scowling.
Remember, this is where we're making inferences. This is your judgment of what the author's attempting to get across to you in the text. Now, part of reading, I know one of my favorite childhood things was to have my parents read to me at night before I went to bed. I know that sounds silly, but I continued that with my kids. I still do it. Now, my 9th grader probably would be embarrassed if I told you this, but I do. We read stuff. But at the same time, part of reading is also reading to yourself, correct? So, you've got to be able to read silently to yourself. And I know that sounds elementary, but there's still times when I have to do things like that, and I have to read something out loud to myself to make myself understand it. Okay? I'm not the most intelligent person in the world, but I know what works for me. Okay? So what I want you to do, you see the paragraph where it says the bell rang for first period? I want you to start reading there and read to where you see Mrs. Garza at the end, and there's a big red V on the right-hand side. Stop after you read that paragraph to yourself silently. And then I'll ask you another question. Once you get through reading it, look up to indicate that you're okay. All right. There is a literary term called a metaphor. Before I tell you what the definition is, you should know this from prior knowledge. Would anybody like to volunteer what their definition of a metaphor is? Even if it's wrong. All right, go ahead, Keith.
Like, you say something like an example.
Is he right? Very much so. Jason, you want to add?
A saying lesson.
Okay, maybe. All right. We're going to go more with Keegan's definition because it may teach a lesson by what the author or what the person saying the metaphor is trying to get across. But basically, a simplified definition would be a metaphor is when you compare somebody to something, or you compare some object to something, trying to get the idea across by using an explanation that they might be used to. Like, for example, a sports metaphor, or just a regular childhood metaphor. There is a metaphor that is listed in that paragraph that you read silently to yourself. If you need to go back and reread that paragraph, find what metaphor the students are being compared to and type it as number 3 on your answer document entitled 7th grade. Again, what you're looking for in that paragraph that you just read, if you need to reread it, reread it. What are the students being compared to? There's a key term that should tell you what that metaphor is intended to be. The term is herded. Herded. When the author used the term herded, he was trying to compare it to something in a metaphor. Just write number 3. Again, indicating that you are finished with that part of the question. Close this on your screen. Remember, you're searching for the metaphor that the students are compared to. All right, I'm going to ask Mr. Newtsy if you would please read the next 2 paragraphs, starting with Victor Linger.
70.
Yes, sir.
Victor lingered, keeping his head down and staring at the desk. He wanted to leave when she did, so he could bump into her and say something clever. He watched her on the sly as she turned to leave. He stood up and hurried to the door, where he managed to catch her eye. She smiled and said, "Hi, Victor." He smiled back and said, "Yeah, that's me." His brown face blushed. Why hadn't he said, "Hi, Teresa," or "How was your summer," or something nice?
As Teresa walked down the hall, Victor walked the other way, looking back, admiring how gracefully she walked, one foot in front of the other. So much for being in the same class, he thought, as he trudged to English. He was practicing scowling. In English, they reviewed the parts of speech. Mr. Lucas, a portly man. Someone look down and tell me what portly means.
Stout and overweight.
Stout and overweight. Waddling down the aisle asking, "What is a noun?" "A person, place, or thing," the class said in unison. "Yes. Now someone give me an example of a person." "You, Victor Rodriguez." "Teresa," Victor said automatically. Some of the girls giggled. They knew they got a crush on Teresa. He felt himself blushing again. "Correct," Mr. Lucas said. "Now provide me with a place." Mr. Lucas called on a freckled kid who answered, "Teresa's house with a kitchen full of big brothers." After English, Victor had math, his weakest subject. You know how he feels in math. He sat in the back by the window, hoping he would not be called on. Victor understood most of the problems, but some of the stuff looked like the teacher had made it up as she went along. How many of y'all had that feeling before Miss Aiken's class? It was confusing, like the inside of a watch. After math, he had a 15-minute break, then social studies, and finally lunch. He bought a tuna casserole with a buttered rolls, some fruit cocktail, and milk. He sat with Michael, who practiced scowling between bites. Girls walked by and looked at him. See what I mean, Vic? Michael scowled. "They love it." "Yeah, I guess so." They ate slowly, Victor scanning the horizon for a glimpse of Teresa. He did not see her. She must have brought lunch, he thought, and is eating outside. Victor scraped his plate and left Michael, who was busy scowling at a girl 2 tables away. The small triangular-shaped campus bustled with students talking about their new classes. Everyone was in a sunny mood. Victor hurried to the bag lunch area, where he sat down and opened his math book. He moved his lips as if he was reading, but his mind was somewhere else. He raised his eyes slowly and looked around. No Teresa. All right, this will be question number 4. As you can see, it is over there in the right-hand side of the margin. The question reads, what obstacles are getting in the way of Victor making Teresa his girl? Again, what obstacles? Just list a couple of obstacles that are getting in the way of Victor making Teresa his girl, as he quotation marked. He said it. Are some of you experiencing some of the same feelings that Victor has in this read? Maybe just a little? Yeah. That's what's so magical about this age. That's why I love teaching this age group, is because all of those feelings are coming to the forefront for the first time, really. Sometimes they're out of control. They're called hormones. But it's a fun age. Enjoy it, are you? Again, the question asks, what are some obstacles that are getting in the way of Victor making Teresa his girl? Remember, I'm going to do this. Part of comprehension is understanding through your own experiences. Now, the easiest thing for me to do would be to call on somebody and ask them to volunteer some type of episode in their young life that is comparable to Victor. But what's one of the main things about this age? You don't like being what? Called out and embarrassed. Right? So I'm going to spare you that. Okay? I will go ahead and venture you and give you my own experience. Okay? If you will give me such time quickly. In 7th grade, the big thing to do was to go to homecoming dance. Okay? It was a formalized thing where you had to go and buy the corsage and you wore a coat and tie and all this kind of stuff. Kind of like our spring formal. Well, there was this girl named Candy that I wanted to ask more than anything. Problem was, Candy had a boyfriend, okay? But luckily for me, sitting back and watching, the boyfriend broke up with her. So, the big thing back then was, it's not like we had instant text messaging and I could just text Candy right then. The big thing was getting up enough courage to actually do it. Pick up the phone, turn the rotary dial, yes, we did have rotary dials on the phones back then, and call her. And have enough guts to sit on the line long enough to do what? To talk to her. And I was not quite the conversationalist that I am now. I wasn't as full of bull as I am now either. So, anyway, I called her, got enough. I called her, hang up. I called her, hang up. So I guess she thought I was some kind of obscene caller. So finally, after about the 5th try, I called her. Had enough courage to say, and guess who answers the phone? It's not her, it's her dad. Who's about 6'3", 250. Owns his own log and pulpwood company. I mean, this joker's like a gorilla, man. He's huge. He good guy. You couldn't ask. He was just as nice to me as he always was. Still to this day, if I go back home and I see him sitting in the coffee shop, he'll know who I am and I'll speak to him. And he'll say, "You remember that time when you called my daughter Candy?" "Yes, sir, I remember." "You were so scared, weren't you?" And I was like, "Yes, sir, I was." So, anyway. It's the truth. So, I called her, asked her, and she was like, "Well, thanks for asking me, but Lyle and I are getting back together." And I was like, "Okay, that's fine. I appreciate you, taking my call." So, boom, I hung the phone. I was devastated. So, what lesson did I learn? I was a jerk. In her eyes, he wasn't at that time, but later on, yes, he was. He was a jerk. But what lesson did I learn that made me a better person? I overcame what? Fear. You should be reading this and making an inference from this. Is Victor fearful?
No.
Little bit. He's hesitant. He's not sure of himself. Okay? And Teresa is his idolized object or person or ultimate goal he wants to achieve. He wants her to be what? His girl. And that's where the obstacles come in. Alright. Next paragraph. He lowered his eyes, pretending to study, then looked slowly to the left. No Teresa. He turned a page in the book and started some math problems that scared him because he knew that he would have to do them eventually. He looked to the right. No sign of her. He stretched out lazily in an attempt to disguise his snooping. Everybody in here, I've watched you do that before. All of you act like we don't know what we're watching y'all doing, but you're doing it, right?
And it is so obvious.
It's so overt. But, anyways, so you can picture in your mind you doing the same thing. Then he saw her. She was sitting with a girlfriend under a plum tree. Victor moved to the table near her and daydreamed about taking her to a movie. When the bell sounded, Teresa looked up and their eyes met. Uh-oh. 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 Can you tell how the story is doing what? It's climbing till what happens? Something awkward's going to happen and it's going to have to fall, and some kind of resolution is going to have to come in the end. Remember, drawing from your prior knowledge last year in Mr. Sellers' Studies in Literature. You should already know these terms. She smiled sweetly and gathered her books. Her next class was French, same as Victor's. They were among the last students to arrive in class, so all the good desks in the back had already been taken. Victor was forced to sit near the front, a few desks away from Teresa, while Mr. Bueller wrote French words on the chalkboard. The bell rang and Mr. Bueller wiped his hands, turned to the class and said, "Bonjour." "Bonjour," braved a few students. "Bonjour," Victor whispered. He wondered if Teresa had heard him. Mr. Bueller said that if the students studied hard at the end of the year, they could go to France and be understood by the populace. One kid raised his hand and asked, "What's populace?" What is populace, by the way? People, population. The people of France. Mr. Bueller asked if anyone knew French. Victor raised his hand, wanting to impress Teresa. The teacher beamed and said, "Très bien, parlez-vous français?"
Whoa.
I just made you think that I know French, right?
I know.
What's it mean?
I know what it means. Very good day. Do you speak French?
How are you doing today, basically? It's conversational. It's basically a greeting. Can you speak French?
Bible.
Victor did not know what to say. The teacher wet his lips and asked something else in French. The room grew silent. Victor felt that all eyes were staring at him. He tried to bluff his way out of it by making noises that sounded French. How many of us have done that before? I can personally raise my hand and say, "Yep, I'm full of crap." I bluffed my way out of a lot of situations that I had no business being in.
Can I interject something?
Yes, sir. Go
Have
ahead.
y'all ever seen, my name is Earl? Remember when Earl has to go back and apologize to all the people he's done? Remember the Swedish girls that said, asked him at the bus station what doing? "Herky Berky." That reminded me of that. Sorry, y'all keep going.
Mr. Bueller, wrinkling his face in curiosity, asked him to speak up. Great rose bushes of red bloomed on Victor's cheeks. A river of nervous sweat ran down his palms. Felt awful. Teresa sat just a few desks away, no doubt thinking he was a fool. Without looking at Mr. Bueller, Victor mumbled, "Frenchy, a weeky in September?" Mr. Bueller asked Victor to repeat what he said. "Frenchy, oh wee, gee, in September." Mr. Bueller understood that the boy didn't know French. and turned away. He walked to the blackboard and pointed to the words in the board with his steel-edged ruler. All right. Now, this will be question number what? 5, and the last one for today's lesson. What was the final action that Victor could have done to impress Teresa in the French class? What was the action that Victor could have done correctly to impress Teresa? And what was the result? You know it's either going to be one of two things. Either he succeeded or he failed. And he did one miserably.
What's the second half?
Again, question asked, what was the one action that Victor could have completed or could have done to impress Teresa the most? And what was the reaction from it? Did he succeed or did he fail? And he did one very, very, very poorly. I'm kind of giving it away. All right. Now, once you get through with that, time-wise, we are going to be finished with this part of the lesson. So we need the wrap-up period, okay, the review. So what I'm going to ask you to do, make sure you've got all 5 of your questions, and we're going to go through them quickly, okay? I just want you to make sure you understand the subject matter of the question. Okay? First question. Someone please refresh my memory as to what we were looking for in question 1, Mr. Johns.
What background information do you learn about Victor in the first paragraph?
Okay? Question 2, Mr. Jordan.
What the girls thought, what he looked like when he was down, what they thought.
Okay. Question 3, Colin.
What the imposter's metaphor was again, please?
Question 4. Anyone? Anyone? Bueller? Barry Bueller?
Obstacles in his way to find the truth.
Obstacles in his way. And number 5.
What could he have done to impress Teresa?
And what was the result? All right, so now what I need you to do, reviewing over it again, we have learned what comprehension of reading entails and the added skill of making inferences. Again, trying to understand in your own judgment what the author is trying to get across to you in the text after you read it. Okay? Now, what you need to do, Mr. Sellers, I just want to make sure I can follow proper class procedure. Do you want them to airdrop them to you by Monday, or do we have? I think we have enough time in class to do it now, if you want to attempt to. So what you need to do.
Just please save your work as with today's date, 10/24,
Yes, sir.
10-24-13, and you can airdrop it to me. We got about 4 minutes before we have to go to break.
I'm ready.
I'm good. Why